Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Gaming Adventure and Discovery Explorers.
A show about our adventures and discoveries as we explore the world of gaming.
On today's show,
We're going to talk about what we've been up to since we have recorded last and over the holidays. We're also going to talk about miniatures and all the options related to how to just keep track of where your character is during a role-playing game session. And then last but not least, and what I'm excited about, is we're going to talk about the Session 0 that I recently held, how I prepared for it, and how it went.
let's explore. So, Chad, it's been, I think, actually 100 years since we last talked about gaming. In that century, yeah, 107. In that century and a bit, what have you been doing? What's been happening in your gaming world?
Yeah, a couple things. So, as we've often bemoaned, my time is precious. My gaming time is very precious. But over the holiday, I did have a little extra. So I went back and picked up Planescape Torment. So it's the enhanced version. It's a role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons-based role-playing game set in the city of Sigil. So I'm about, I think, halfway, two-thirds through that game, and it's really interesting. It's super intricate in setting and story-based. So I have barely I've complained about this a little bit, and I hold to that. Like, there's not really any dungeons in this game, or very few dungeons, and no dragons whatsoever, which is fine. I don't really care about dragons, but it's kind of funny. And so there's a lot of, the premise is that you are a person, a character with no memory, and so throughout the game you're trying to remember kind of who you are. And another premise is that you cannot die in a permanent way. So
Right.
in the game that's fun because if you're killed in combat, you just wake up like a little time has passed, and you wake up, in a different place, but not a drastically different place. So it's inconvenient, but it's not a super problem. Anyway, it's great. So I'm going through. I'm getting my characters, learning memories. I have the party kind of filled out. I have kind of maxed out the number of characters in my party, which is fun. I think it allows you to have yourself and 6. I think so. There's the flying skull that joins you at the beginning.
Oh, yes.
Tiefling. Yeah, Tiefling, Thief. There's a Gith Zerai, I think, one of those Gith people who's a fighter, and then there's a cleric who just joined me, and then there's a mage, like a fire mage. I did do the saving, and restarting. So anyway, so that was fun. Generally, this game is really short on combat, though. I wish it was spread out more, so that the story bits and the combat bits were more even. But other than that, I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Awesome.
And then I won't go into as much detail. I could ramble on forever, but a friend of mine recently gave us, he's kind of thinning out his stuff, and he gave us an Xbox 360. So as usual, I'm about 6 to 10 years behind in my computer and video game life. So
that's the sweet spot.
It's great. I'm having fun. It's so cheap.
It's exactly.
And you just played Skyrim, so you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
And playing Halo 3. I played the first 2 Halos in a little more timely way, but I don't, again, I don't have a lot of time, but played a little Halo 3. And one thing about that I really am noticing is the vehicle combat is a lot more prominent early in that game. So I've only played it a few hours, but I remember Halo 2, there were all these promises during development that it would have all these vehicles that you could drive and whatever.
Right.
And there were some when it came out, but they had to really cut it back. And so far, I think they invested a lot of that in Halo 3 is what it looks like. So that, and then over the holiday, I realize I've fallen into this a little bit of a pattern where you discover a new thing, whether it's a TV show or a musician or whatever, and so you feel like you need to get everything surrounding that thing that you're suddenly very interested in. And I've done that a little bit with, I'll get these things, with the adventures from Lamentations of the Flame Princess, mostly Zach Smith, Zach S's stuff. So for Christmas, I was gifted 2 of them, and I love them, 2 adventures. And so the first one is this, A Red and Pleasant Land, which just looks super fun. Apparently, I don't know how much is a spoiler and how much you can just tell, but it's short version is it's D&D with a Alice in Wonderland theme.
Okay.
But it's Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So we've talked about this a little bit, but the whole point of that game is that it's disturbing and weird and lethal. So if you look at the cover art, I don't know if it'll come up here, but can you see like Alice there? But bad things have happened. So I don't think it'll quite come up. But
Oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah, we got it.
She's sitting there, and there's like a rapier, a blood-covered rapier there, and it's great. So there's other cool spoilers that I won't wreck, and then there's a campaign setting, Frostbitten and Mutilated, that it's more new. It's 2018. I think it might have won an Emmy. It's a kind of Northern Reach campaign setting, so super fun with that too. So good reading, but I'm also realizing like, oh, I can't just like that. I enjoy those things, but I think that'll be the last of that I'll buy for a while.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I need a palate cleanser a little bit because there's so much of the tone is it's good. You know, for example, it's like I love the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed, and I can listen to a lot of it, but sometimes you need some Tom Petty in your life.
Yeah, you need to take a break from some of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm about at my kind of. I mean, there's so much to read already, but I'm realizing like, okay, my next investments will probably be in a little bit different direction.
Yeah, I hear you.
So anyway, and been back reading Bornheim for reasons we'll get around to. I've talked
yes,
about
we will.
Another example, revisiting that a little. So that's what I've been up to. Never enough time to do all the things you want to do in the gaming world.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
I'm trying to squeeze it in. So and meanwhile I. Have a day job now. I didn't for a while, and I was back when I was unemployed. I was able to catch your daytime streams.
Yes.
I am not able to do that anymore, and I know that is some of the time that you use for gaming and doing your hobbies.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What have you been up to, both streaming and otherwise? Since
well,
we talked last.
On the stream, I've been painting miniatures, which I'll sort of get into when we delve into that topic later in this episode.
Okay.
Which has been really fun. Gaming-wise, has been two things that have been occupying my headspace. One, I've been playing Creative Assembly's Total War Warhammer. So Creative Assembly has had these Total War games like Total War Rome and various things like that. Historical war games, simulations.
Okay.
But they got hold of the Warhammer license, the fantasy license, from Games Workshop. I don't know how much we know about the Warhammer Fantasy IP, but they basically killed off that world that they've created for about 25 years. They had they called it the End Times, and they destroyed that whole setting and rebooted it to launch a different game, which they call the Age of Sigmar.
Oh, right. Okay. Now, is it both in the computer world and the tabletop world?
No, in the computer world, it seems like when they killed off the tabletop version of Warhammer Fantasy, they and up to that point they've been really stingy with their IP, giving it to game developers. But after they killed it off, they gave it to everybody, and all these new games are coming out in that Warhammer Fantasy setting. And I'd been yearning for years to get my hands on this game, and I finally did it. I think the first one, the plan is for the series, they're going to put out 3 games of Total War Warhammer. And in those 3 games, they say that they're going to put in every faction that was on the tabletop at the end, which is, I don't know, a dozen, maybe more, different factions.
So when we say factions, what's an example of a faction?
The faction would be like the Realms of Men, Wood Elves, High Elves, Dark Elves, Orcs, and I could go on. Dwarves, yes, indeed. Okay. So they're in the second game of that series now, and I just got that, and I have been playing, because you can do just one-off skirmish games against multiplayer online stuff. You can do that. You can play against the computer. Then you can also play their grand strategy campaign, which is where you take control of a faction and try and conquer the world of Warhammer.
Wow, okay.
And
are these real-time strategy games?
They are. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So like StarCraft and Warcraft, the back in the before World of Warcraft. Right?
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's a mixture of like a real-time tactical war game when you go into like battle mode and you're controlling the armies. But then there's a giant like world campaign map where you're moving around like your generals and stuff, building cities and armies and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay.
So that's been really fun, and to see how they come up with, like, how do let's say the orcs function in their world building as opposed to the elves. And just the different mechanics that they give to the different factions to make them have a different flavor.
Yeah.
So the orcs, they have a little bar on the side of the screen. It's called your fightiness bar.
Oh.
And the more you fight, the higher it gets. And if it reaches the top, you start spawning more orc armies. The game just gives them to you. But if it gets really low, then you suffer attrition and your armies start to like die off and disperse. And it's stuff like that. So, it's really
That's
fun.
messed up. Warhammer is so messed up. If you go to war more.
Yeah, exactly. But that's just the orcs.
Right.
For the dwarves, they have this fun thing where it assigns you a mission. Like there was a slight against the dwarven race in the Book of Grudges. So you have to defeat 2 orc armies in 15 turns and that kind of thing. So, but I've been just totally delving into that in my free time. And it's just been fantastic. All the time I spent in the early 80s and 90s painting those Warhammer miniatures, now I get to move them around on the computer screen, and it's making 13-year-old me ecstatically happy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So
yeah.
Turn-based? Is it turns or is it?
It is turns. It is turns.
Turns.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something else. Okay. Oh. How does that world building work? How much of it is perpetual? How much? Because you're playing people mostly. Or is it?
You are playing. You take the control of a faction lord. Like the head of a group, and using them, you try and build up your empire. All of the cities in there that are there for you to conquer, all stay on the map the entire time. And you try and conquer them or raid them or that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just so involved too. I kind of lose my mind. I play it for a couple hours, and then I have to stop because if I don't stop, I'll play for 5 more hours. It's just one more turn.
I can imagine.
Yeah, just one more turn.
Yep.
That's all I need.
Those games just feel like so much work to me. Like.
Yeah.
You have to really use your brain, right? Which I know that seems silly, like how hard I work, like on my hobbies. Like we'll talk about the Session Zero, for example. But like for some reason, I had a time where I loved those games. But like right after I read Ender's Game, because part of spoiler alert, I'm gonna spoil Ender's Game. You don't mind if I spoil it, do you?
Oh no, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so the idea is he's, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but it turns out he thought he was simulating an invasion of these alien creatures who they believe to be a threat to the world. So he thought he was just simulating it and that he was being worn out during this lifelike simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And they also thought that he was the savior. He was going to be the general. Ender was going to be the general to lead humanity into a battle against these alien creatures, and humans would survive. It turned out at the end that it was a trick, and he was actually leading and guiding the world forces against a real war. So it was just this cool, he was doing his best in the training mode, but he thought every decision he made was just computer digits, but it turned out to be real human lives, for example. Whatever, as he was being this kind of general. So I had after that, I had a mode where I loved those games. I really wanted to be Ender, but it was too much work. I was like, I'm going to play this game as if these are human lives. These are actual lives.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's exhausting.
That was like 10, 12 years ago. I'm like, I would not do that now. I would not.
In this Warhammer game, once I get past like my 12th settlement, I'm like, I don't care what happens to these people. Just give me money. I don't care. Revolt or whatever.
Which is the Warhammer way.
Yeah, exactly.
Life can't mean anything in Warhammer. The whole thing doesn't work.
Exactly.
Cool. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much wraps up everything I've been doing gaming-wise. So, we just had Session 0 of the D&D campaign that you are DMing and I'm playing in. And I would love to know where you got your plan for your Session 0 and just kind of talk about like what you had planned for it and if it went the way you thought it would.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and one of the things we've talked about in this space was that the last campaign just went longer than I had anticipated. So I've had a lot of time because I've been hungry to start a new campaign, and so
Mm-hmm.
but when it finally became time, I looked at my sources and I knew I wanted to do a session zero, and so I went to kind of some of my favorites. So I went to really three main sources specifically, and then just stuff that I thought about. So I went to
Mm-hmm.
the Angry GM. He actually has a book coming out that I know is, he's excited about. So anyway, the Angry GM has just tons of great GMing advice. He can also be a little bit of a polarizing figure, mostly in his persona, his angry persona. But if you really just read his articles and his stuff, if you read what he writes, he's really thoughtful and gives really solid advice.
Yeah.
So I went and read through that, and his advice was not even expect to play at all. Like just use
Mm.
session zero as like a sponge, just to hear what people are interested in. So then you could tailor the campaign that way. And I read through Sly Flourish, who's also great, not polarizing. Everyone loves Mike Shea. And then and then I watched a YouTube video, the WebMD guys, and I'll put these links in our notes for YouTube watchers. I think the WebMD guys especially were a little bit more get to the chase in their advice. So that advice was more, try to get people in, get the characters made, and try to have an encounter during that session zero, so people kind of really feel like they've played the game. So that was kind of where I started with that, hodgepodge. And as always, just the way I DM, everything's a collage to me. So I take my sources and I listen, I mix them up, and I take the parts that I think work, and I think through the strategies, and that's what I did here. So I sent out a plan to the players I'd identified. So I had 5 players and myself who had agreed to join up. You were one of them. I sent out an email with some of the things that I had, and I thought this was important. So it was an email with some of the key things of like, here's stuff I already have either decided on or I'm strongly leaning towards or just what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had there's some things that I'm in the mood for. Now that's a limited list, but I also wanted to make sure that people knew what they were kind of getting into.
Yeah.
And it was things like I want to set schedule. Some of it was just logistics. We're going to play 5th edition on a set schedule monthly.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to start at low levels. These are things I just really want to do. I want to do more downtime and really lean into that. Try to make things a little bit more realistic and slow things down in my homebrew setting. But other than that, really, everything else was pretty much on the table. I mean, I had some ideas about what I would have loved to play, but I also knew that it's not, I think the best DMing happens when you're kind of collaborating and doing it for the players. And also it's just a learning edge for me, or a growth edge in my DMing. I really want to involve the players more directly, the player characters more directly in the plots.
Mm.
Because I've used those published adventures. All of my DMing has really started with the plot first, and then kind of invited the player characters aboard the plot that's already happening. And I don't think that's terrible. I think if you're doing that as a DM, that can be fine. But I wanted to go a different direction, so I wanted to really infuse the story with the player characters. So
You talked about the emails that you sent out saying like laying out the basics for it. I thought that was fantastic. Just laying out some parameters, right, as a player to know like this is what the GM is thinking about doing, and now I can start thinking about how a character might fit into that.
yeah.
And how I can start getting into it. So it was great. Before we even started, I was able to start thinking about it. It was great.
Yeah. And you weren't the only one. It was great. And so one of the things that I had written in that was, somewhat realistic setting with low magic. In human society, other races are rare. And so I didn't require, it was not a requirement all human. That was one of the things that in my mind I was thinking more Game of Thrones, which is pretty much all humans. And then so it was you and Moira, another player, both came to me separately, completely independently with non-human character concepts that you were both super excited about. So I'm like, all right, well, cool. That'll be great. Like, okay, that's a way, again, with my whole idea was it's not about me, it's not about my thing.
Yeah.
At the same time, you guys are going to be weirdos in a human world. Like
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
you both seem fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm this character too. Like I don't know that I've ever played a human when I'm a player, though I probably would next time. But anyway, so I get it. Yeah, so that was one thing that I didn't really expect. The players want, that was the first kind of deviation from what was holding in my head, but at the same time, it was like, okay,
Right.
fine. I guess we're going to
Yeah.
have not, not. And I could have put my
Yeah.
foot down. I could have done that, but geez, I don't want to ruin your all's fun right out of the gate. So, or disappoint you. I didn't want to disappoint you right out of the gate just for my own, like, whatever. So,
Yeah. But I think it's interesting too because the with the knowledge of what you put in those emails, I think myself and the other player, we know what we're getting into. We
yeah.
should, right? Because we
Yeah.
know that we're going to be the weirdos. So I think that that's something that we're taking on with full knowledge that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
could not be great
Yeah.
for our
Yeah. Yeah.
characters. We could
Yeah.
have a rough time.
You're going to attract some attention. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's great. That actually that's part of it too. Once I really thought about it, it's like that pays off. That invests more in the direction of what I want anyway, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the trouble's going to come to you, and
Mm-hmm.
and you'll have a great opportunity to kind of direct that. So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, so walking in, I sent that email around, and then I thought about my plan, and the first part I think was the most important, which was just to really hear what people were interested in. I had some prompts, and I might have had some of these in the email too, but I had some questions about what people liked, but really my objective, and this was straight from Angry DM's advice, really I just wanted to hear you guys talk and make notes. I didn't want to have an opinion about most of those things. And so I think that worked out pretty well. So we did unfortunately have two people who were ill. So of the 5 players, we only had 3, which is a bummer. But the show must go on to a point. So we had a great discussion with the 4 of us. And though immediately, this is always how the world works. I think I asked something to the effect of, so, who all has seen Game of Thrones? 2 out of 3 had seen Game of Thrones. Who all has
Mm.
seen Lord of the Rings? 2 out of 3 had seen Lord of the Rings. Like, who all has seen, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Who all has
Mm-hmm.
played Skyrim? I think that, actually, I don't remember if I thought of Skyrim at the moment. Actually, I think it was 2 out of 3 had actually played Skyrim, also. So,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
was fine because you all were good sports about it, and everyone had at least heard a little bit about all of the other things,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, oh man, you guys, I can't even like get a common reference here so that I can drill in. But it went fine. It was great. It was just like, okay, like I got to roll with this. Um,
Yeah.
and so we just started talking about like what do we what is it about these things that we like. And I just took notes. I took tons of notes. I used the same Google Doc that I had used as my basis for planning, and I just kind of typed away while we all talked. And occasionally I would ask some questions, especially if I wanted to drill in. And there were
Mm-hmm.
things I really wanted to cover. Like one thing that came out that was really cool early, I think, was that everybody likes that unfolding feeling of exploration and learning about mysteries. So at the table, at least the 3 of you all like that.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's cool. It's like that, and that's something I think I haven't done that much of or done enough of. So that came out. That was some great unity. We talked about. Eventually we talked about Harry Potter. I had forgotten I forgot about Harry Potter at first because Harry Potter's never quite been my thing.
Yeah.
Really nobody was too into the whole Harry Potter thing. That version of Wizard School.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
There was elements of it I think that people liked, but so we talked about that. Well, one thing that came up, which is really important, that I almost forgot to add was, what about combat? Like, how do people like combat or not? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there was more alignment around that than I feared, and because that's something that for D&D you can spend easily 6 hours,
Oh yeah.
just in combat if you want. And especially in the groups that I've been a part of, I think who in part because many of us started playing together during 4th edition, and in part just by
Yeah.
kind of the natures of the people at the table. And I can't remember. I think one of the players, when he all said this, of like there's a feeling in many combats that there is a solution to it, that it's a puzzle to be solved.
Yeah. Right.
And everyone at the table at that moment was like, I'm over that. I'm
Mhm.
over those
Exactly.
kinds of combats.
We totally had
Yeah,
consensus on that.
Yeah, which was a relief, frankly, because
Yeah.
because that's a little harder to find a happy medium a little bit if someone loves the 4th edition long combats and someone doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I'm a little scared of, I don't know if I'll do it yet, I'm definitely going to talk about it and see, is one thing to move combat along quicker is for me to push people a little faster and to maybe take turns away if you're taking too much time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of DMs do that, and I have some great respect for that, because that if you want to move combat along, you gotta take your turn, right?
Yeah.
The combat
Yeah.
won't move if you don't take your turn.
Yep.
But I don't want to punish people. We're here to have fun, right? So
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that.
Have you thought about how you might implement that? Like the nuts and bolts of how that might work?
Yeah. So the first thing is I want to make sure everyone gives me some permission about how that works. So I don't want to surprise anybody, and I don't want to be imposed upon. I'm thinking a timer, probably. Because, what I have tried to do with mixed success is just nag people as a DM.
Yeah.
Frankly, that just doesn't work. Or it hasn't worked for me, just nagging people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, different makeup. We didn't have those agreements up front. I'm less excited about that. I also don't want to be in that position of being like teacher or whatever. I don't like that kind of authority when I'm DMing.
Yeah.
Because anyway, it takes the fun away. But I think if we had a timer that we'd all agreed to, it's very objective then.
Mm-hmm.
And if people know that they're about to lose their turn, they'll have their cantrip ready to go. I think the wizards could have a tough time with this.
Yeah.
And so they'll know. It's like, okay, I'll just use, I can't even think of what. Scorching Burst. Is that one? Scorching Ray? Something?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Scorching Ray sounds right.
I've never actually played it. Scorching Ray. Yeah, I have not actually played a wizard, but I had played a cleric once. But anyway, they'll just have that ready to go, and like it'll go off, at 30 seconds or whatever, and then they have 5 more seconds maybe, and they'll be like, okay, fine, Scorching Ray or whatever, some real spell.
Okay.
So that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Everybody, as we've been talking a long time, I started to summarize so we could do, one way we could do this would be through like a city-based adventure. Like the group hadn't really said, what I really love? I love those parts of Game of Thrones where they're wandering around, King's Landing. No one had quite said that, but no one had said they hate that either. And so I just threw that out there as something to talk about. And again, the three at the table were like, ooh, that would be pretty cool. That could be really neat. So that was another kind of fun alignment.
Yeah.
And I think that reminds me, similar with the combat question, I think as players and just human beings, don't assume there's conflict. Don't assume people don't agree until you ask the question.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's something I can do a lot. It's like, oh, nobody will want to do this, so I don't even raise the question.
Yep.
At least in that case, it was easy. So that gave me some really cool ideas. So a lot of city, and I'll find a way to do dungeons because it is Dungeons and Dragons, and I think dungeons are fun. Some of it will be the way the city is, but also dungeons in the city or under the city or parts of the city that seem like dungeons. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One distinction that I've seen in Vornheim, and I'll pull this. Actually, we'll just talk about this now. So one of the things it talks about is the difference between traveling in a city and crawling in the city. And so if you're just trying to get to the store and no one's chasing you and you're not looking for trouble and you've been to the store before, you just go to the store. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a thing every time. You don't have to roll random encounters every time.
Yeah.
Now, a crawl in the city, though, is if you've never been there before, or someone's chasing you, or you're in a rush for some reason. And that's when things change. If you're lost in Manhattan, it's a very different experience than if I'm going to go across the street, to the bodega and just pick up some beer or something.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things, as I'm starting to dive in. This little book is super dense, and I've talked about this before. Just trying to get a sense for how useful it will be, and I'm learning. Let me just talk about this a little bit. Some of it is very specific, setting specific, but there's also, kind of cool maps, and I think I am going to use this pretty well as starting as written, but there's some setting stuff, which is really cool, some principles, but there's also a couple dungeon-like adventure areas in here, which I might or might not use. I don't know yet. But then there's also some great rules of thumb for how to travel through neighborhoods and how to create neighborhoods on the fly. And I think that's going to be super cool, and ways to create non-player characters, or again on the fly, and kind of some cool tables and ways to kind of find things and some principles for how to explore this city. That I'm also really looking forward to. So it's giving me a lot of kind of cool things. One of the things that the great pieces of advice, if you can find it, is just on page 6, and it says, there are thousands of guilds and organizations in Bornheim. It's the author's opinion that the clear presentation of various societies, thieves, guilds, and cults in city supplements generally makes a city feel small and comprehensible. And this is not what we're going for here. So associations and small conspiracies metastasize and meld throughout Bornheim like shadows in torchlight, making it difficult in the interlinking enormity to clearly divide one from the next. So, already that's a principle there of like, oh, there's a lot of people talking to each other. There's a lot of stuff going on. So you don't have to plot it all out because that makes it finite.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah.
I am gonna think out some hooks, and I'll have some specific ones. I had like one. I think I think there's going to be a Wayfinders. A Wayfinders guild. That just escorts people from place to place.
Okay.
And they also are very powerful, and that's a reason why there are no clear maps about Vornheim, because they discourage clear map making, because then you don't need a Wayfinder.
Exactly. They don't want to put themselves out of business. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they're, as a powerful guild, that's one of the reasons, that also helps me as a DM. It's like, no, there are no maps because someone has taken care of that.
I like it.
So that's pretty much where I am. For how Session 0 went and what's next. So I think February, that first Saturday in February, we're going to have our Session 1. I still need to do some work around that, but I have a pretty good sense. I think it's going to start in a port. Vornheim itself is landlocked, so I think I created a port of Vornheim, which is a little like East St. Louis. I think it's East St. Louis. It's a city. It's a nearby city with the name of the bigger city in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the port will be there, and it'll be like 30 miles away from the city itself. And so I'll start everybody there. And I updated my map, and I emailed that around, and have given everyone the mission of remembering, or not remembering, but coming up with a hook. Why are you coming to Vornheim in the first place?
Yes.
It could be anything, but why? A why. Could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Oh, and the other thing that came up during Session 0. This is one of those inspired moments that I had like the hour before people started showing up, was that I made everybody think of a secret for their character. And then I made everybody draw out of a hat a character who knows that secret. So already what I want to do is kind of give some connections already, and everyone already described how much they like learning new things and learning and unfolding things. And then if someone's not into that, it could be a really innocuous nothing secret. And like their middle name is Bartholomew is the example I gave. Could be nothing, and we could be just over it. Nothing. I'm not going to dictate that no one tells the rest of the party their secret immediately. Like, that's your choice. Whatever. But I have a hunch that a lot of you, or at least I guess a lot of you, there's only 5 of you total, but that some of you will hang on to those secrets a little bit. And that'll give me an opportunity to kind of screw with you also. I think that could be really fun. So
I thought that was a great idea when you mentioned it, because I was thinking about it is adventure hooks, interpersonal adventure hooks within the party, right? Which sets us up for some RP opportunities, some role playing right off the bat, which I think is great. And like you said, the secret's as big or small as the player wants them to be, but it gives us the opportunity, which I really thought was a great idea. Yeah,
cool. Thank you. I try to learn from the greats. I try to steal from the greats as best I can, or at least the stuff that I like. So, a lot of this, I haven't watched a lot of Critical Role, but I've watched some. Because how do you not? It just kind of seeps through the woodwork if you're online in D&D these days. And I know Matt Mercer does a great job of integrating stories, the player character stories with his campaign setting. And so that was inspiration, for me as well.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you want to share kind of your character a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
How you're going to be showing up in this campaign?
Yeah. So you sent out the thing talking about how it's a mostly human-centric campaign, and so I immediately asked you if I could play a Warforged. And
And we're not in Eberron, also, by the way.
no, we are not in Eberron. But to your credit as a DM, I think that you do a great job of rolling. And like you said, you want the players to have fun. And so you said, yeah, but let's make it fit in the world. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So my idea, my concept was this Warforged who was built by the Parhawk civilization, I guess, is that a good term for them? The wizards, the ancient.
Well, no, they were the leaders of the civilization.
Okay, yeah.
So it's more of an order, kind of that also worked out as the government.
Gotcha.
In a kind of tyrannical, good for them sort of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so my idea was the Warforged built by the Parhawk to aid them in their various machinations. And instead of going with the straight Warforged, which is in the title, right, built for battle, I was looking at the D&D supplements for it, and they break them down into 3 different classes or types. One is like a fighter type, another is like a ranger type, and another one was called the Envoy. And their idea for the Envoy was, wizards, that it was the catch-all class, right? Instead of being the catch-all being like all of the, maybe this one was a wizard or a cleric or anything that wasn't built for martial stuff. And I've been listening to a lot of, anyone who's watched my Twitch channel probably knows that I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan. I've been listening to or been to my house or talked to me at all for about 5 minutes. I'll bring it up. And he had introduced this group in his books, the golems, that were built by an ancient civilization that had no free will, but the ancient civilization is now gone. They've been gone for 5,000 years. And these golems are now being unearthed by archaeological digs and whatnot. Yeah, and are trying to find their place in society and find out what it means to have a soul or a personality. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if this Warforged was used as a sort of heel bot by the Parhawk, but was essentially a cleric?
Yeah.
A cleric, he didn't have a belief in a god because he didn't really have a soul or or anything that a human being would call a soul. But I kind of thought in my head, maybe he's got some sort of religious artifact embedded in him that focuses the power of the god and something like that. But the real hook for me was the journey that this character would take from about just learning how to be in the world and learning to live with human beings and finding out what emotions are all about and finding out what belief in a god would be. Maybe he won't end up believing in this god. Maybe he'll believe in a different one. But for me, that journey looked really interesting.
Okay, cool.
And so,
I was thinking about that.
I kind of wrote it out, and that's what I sent to you, and you were like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, one thing that I do want to, I hadn't even thought of at first, was we're going to have to also, like, there's something about that being a cleric and the relationship with your god. Because one of the things I talked about during the session, and actually with Kayakoni, who's on, another player, we talked a lot about this also, is that I want to really make sure the mechanics and the themes and the story are intertwined. And so it occurred to me that this whole cleric thing, we're going to have to, really, that's going to be a thing for sure.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of the things I think is going to be that I would do for any cleric in this campaign is that there's going to be a relationship between your god or your god's, either avatar or some of the kind of the angels or whatever. Something there. There's gonna be, and I don't know. We'll have to sort it out. I don't have a decision yet, but the coming attraction is like that's gonna.
Yeah.
There's gonna be something there.
Yeah. And I've had definite thoughts about it too. as far as, he does all of the things that a cleric should do. So, no, but this is something that we can talk about offline, too, if you don't want to get into it too deep here, because these conversations can take a while.
They can, and I think we're heading to go a little long. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's... But more to come, and that's the fun of having this part of the session 0 and being thoughtful about this, and is that, I'll say we'll have to think about that. So, so just one more thing about that, and then we should maybe shift topics. But he said he does all the things that clerics do. So does that mean he goes to kind of the worship spaces, and that he does kind of the rituals around that? And is there a prayer or an attempt at prayer, or?
I think my idea, and
thanks, Kaikoni.
Well, that's interesting that you should say that. That's one of the skills that I took from him. Is that not skills. One of the spells that I took is the ability to perform religious functions. He can perform weddings, and he does all that stuff.
It's been a while since I've looked at that. Isn't that really powerful? Because if two party members get married, don't they get some really cool buff permanently or something? Is that?
I don't know. I only looked at it from my end. I didn't look at what that actually means.
I think there's actually in-game benefits for those rituals that you perform. So anyway, we'll have to look at that. That'd be great.
The whole party's getting married now. No, but I thought he would totally go to his temple and pray, do his daily devotions, and all of that stuff. But how he connects to it, I don't know. Big question marks.
Oh man, that's great. That's good stuff. Okay, fun. And that's something I think, I'm actually excited to explore, because again, in D&D, there's no atheist in D&D. Gods, the benefit of gods, you don't have to worship anybody, but you see the benefit of them every day, you see magic. Where there's clerics, there's a real thing that happens when a cleric casts a spell. And so there's no not believing. Now there is not worshiping and not engaging with. Sure, that's totally a thing. So anyway, that's something I want to explore. There is, it's not that he. So the inner life of what's his name?
Mend 13.
Mend. I was like, it's not Rend, because that was
it's not Rend.
From our last campaign. Another reflection from the last thing. So shifting topics just a little, was another agreement, which was very funny and it was hilarious, and also I loved about session 0 was that I had said okay, we don't want to do those tactical combats like I mentioned before. So so I've been trying to do more theater of the mind, so we'll do more, and then everybody. Again, the three of you and myself included, were like, well, we kind of like miniatures. We kind of like the toys, and we kind of like that.
Miniatures are fun.
I'm paraphrasing, but that was definitely the tone. So I was like, okay, well, we'll think about that. We'll try to get that balance of. I love minis too, and we'll think about the balance of how to use minis without making it hyper tactical.
Yes.
So I wonder, Galen, thinking about how we're going to be using some miniatures, what are some other things I should think about as in my new campaign about the use of minis, or what are some of the options, or what should I be thinking about?
Yeah, then there's so much to think about too. So
but you're the expert. You're the expert, Galen. You have a Twitch channel where you paint miniatures.
I do. I have been painting a lot of miniatures lately, and that's one of the things about them that I think can be fun inside the hobby, sort of adjacent to the gaming. Is painting, and that's one of the things I'll talk about too. So when you do a game, you can do theater of the mind, but if you want to do a mini, or you want to use some sort of tactical map or something like that, there are a few options that come to mind for me. And the first is you can use counters, like little cutout tokens. And there are numerous sources online, like token creators, that will give you a little 1-inch circle into which you can put a piece of art that you found online. And then you can go ahead and print these out on a sheet, punch them out or cut them out, and then you can use those in your D&D game. I used some of those in my Curse of Strahd campaign for zombies and stuff like that. Something where I knew I'd need a bunch of them, and I didn't have a great stock of minis, so I just throw out, there are 12 zombies there. Easy to use, really simple. All you have to pay for is printer ink.
Yeah,
on that.
interesting,
It's
cool.
really, really
And
simple.
the Coast really went big on tokens at the kind of mid to later fourth
Mm-hmm.
edition era,
Mm-hmm.
like their box set, and I have it back there. It's off camera, but a couple other box sets came with tokens, if not all of them, in the later half. There some of their
Yeah.
more monster things, and they were really nice. And I think I just did a quick look, and I think a lot of those can be bought on eBay if you're looking for the
Mm-hmm.
tokens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are
And
pre-made, right? So they're
exactly.
little
Yeah.
easier.
So yeah, if you just want something and you don't want to make it, that's a good resource too.
Yeah.
Just find those already printed, already punched out
Hmm.
tokens for you.
I have a
And
bunch I don't use because I use minis.
exactly, exactly. And moving on right from the tokens, that transfers right into paper minis, stand-up minis.
Mm.
And I know that Pathfinder has a bunch of box sets that they have. And again, that these are little, they
2D
measure
minis,
up with
Kai
your
Tony calls them.
standard tabletop. Yeah, 2D mini, but they slot into a base so that you can move them around. They stand up on your board and you can move them around.
Gotcha.
I think Pathfinder put out like at least 2 boxes that did all of their like monster manual kind of stuff. And then
Hmm.
they did a
Hmm.
few that were like
Yeah.
covered like basic player classes and stuff like that. There are also numerous people online you can find that draw minis, and then you can buy a set like a PDF or whatnot and get those, print them out yourself and stick them in a base. There are 2 of them that I know of that I can mention: Printable Heroes on
Hmm.
Twitter and
Hmm.
also Trash Mob Minis on
Hmm.
Twitter as
Cool.
well. They both have a huge range of minis. Some of them are, I know the Printable Hero ones, instead of being just a one-sided thing, so it's the same picture on both sides, it has a front and a back. So
Oh,
you'll see the
nice.
front of your kobold and the rear of your kobold, which is just kind of fun. And they also have an option. They will print them out and cut them out for you and send you the finished product if you don't want to print them out yourself and cut them out yourself.
Oh,
Um,
nice. You know how expensive they are?
it varies because you can buy sets. I know the Printable Heroes
Okay.
guy also has a Patreon. So you can you can donate to
Mm-hmm.
their Patreon and then get different sets for different amounts of money and stuff like that. But the detail is really good on them. But
Yeah.
also the price point is going up in these. So using 0 minis that's no money. That's just theater of the mind stuff. That's
Yeah.
no
Theater of the
money at
mind. It's
all.
free. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the cheapest way. And then again, the tokens, just a little bit of money for the printing. These printed minis, these stand-ups, the 2D
Mm-hmm.
stand-ups
Mm-hmm.
are a little more expensive.
Yeah.
And then we start
Yeah.
to get into actual 3D minis. And there are different ways you can go here too. You can go with the pre-painted minis that I think Wizards does some. They don't do a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they used to do a lot, and you can find some in on eBay and whatnot, old sets.
Yep. Yep.
But then any other basic miniature game that's in your setting that you can find a 25 mil miniature for, that's like that 1 inch kind of thing, you
Mm-hmm.
can find
Mm-hmm.
those a myriad of manufacturers that make these
Yeah.
things from all different settings, fantastic settings, and like with space and stuff, or the general sword and
Mm-hmm.
board kind of thing as well. From there, you go to you can get custom made 3D printed minis
Oh.
from Hero
That's cool. I
Forge.
remember. I remember when the technology of that was just starting to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it was probably about 10 years ago, like 2006, 2007, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I first encountered it when I was playing World of Warcraft. It was just starting to come. It was a little expensive then, and you could make your World of Warcraft figure into like a miniature,
Mm-hmm.
and that just seemed like the coolest thing, especially if you were a World of Warcraft person.
Yep. Yep. I go on there and I will occasionally create characters
Uh-huh.
like versions of the D&D characters I'm thinking of, and just sorting to see like what that might look
Oh,
like in
this website
miniature
is
form and
really
whatnot.
cool.
it is really cool. You can spend a lot of time there, and like because they have different things that they can print your mini out of. They can do like a pretty basic plastic that's just it's kind of grainy, not good for painting. Then there's a
Hmm.
higher tier plastic that's a little more fragile, good for painting. They also have steel and bronze that they can do
Whoa.
as well.
Whoa, that's
But
so awesome.
but these range like the ones that are good for painting. You can get a mini painted for, printed and sent to you for about $35.
Okay.
So it's a little more expensive than if
Hmm.
you were to go down to your local friendly gaming
Yeah.
store
Yeah.
and buy a mini made out of plastic or pewter
Hmm.
or what have you. That's
Yeah.
probably going to run you, I don't know, $10 maybe less. And that's when you get into the people that make miniatures that we all think of when we think about miniatures. And I think we are in the golden age now of miniature makers. There are
Oh.
more people making minis now than I've ever seen in my entire life, and the quality is
Oh.
absolutely fantastic.
Oh, cool.
You can find whatever kind of style you want in your mini, you can find someone that makes it. A great resource for looking for a mini is to go to Cool Mini or Not. They have a huge range there in their store that you can kind of sort through. But it's also a good place because people will paint minis and then upload those pictures. And then
Nice.
the minis get graded on like painting style and all that. But it's also a good way of kind of finding new minis because you can search by different company that makes them and whatnot. And it's how I found the mini that I will be purchasing to represent Mend 13
Oh,
in
nice.
our new game. Yeah. So
Are
that
you are
is
you gonna paint it? Are you gonna paint that one, Galen?
nah.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
just
laughing.
leave it
I know
bare.
that's totally an inside joke. Several of the minis I remember you using as your player character were like unpainted metal minis, or you were borrowing mine, like which is fine, except for you're the person we go to in our community to paint our minis.
Yes.
So it always cracked me
Yeah.
up. The irony there.
I I have never used a mini. Oh, that's not true. The very first character I played in a D&D 4th edition game was a mini that I painted. But after that, I haven't used a mini that I've painted as my own character.
I
And
thought so.
as Kayakoni says in the chat, painting the mini is a great way to ensure the PC will die.
Yeah, yeah, or
So,
doom the campaign, the entire campaign. That's a true thing.
exactly. But yeah, that leads me into the hobby topic as well that goes
Yeah.
along with this. That's right adjacent to it because this is gaming, not just RPGs. When you talk about like tabletop wargaming as well, miniatures are a huge deal, and it's a way
Yes.
that when I discovered tabletop wargaming, I discovered Warhammer 40,000, and I have never in my life played a game of Warhammer 40,000. I've probably I've probably painted near 1,000 minis for that game though,
Oh,
and
just
it's
for
a
that
way
game.
to just for that game, just for that game.
That's great.
It's a way of keeping yourself into the hobby. Maybe you don't like the rules, but maybe you just like the art. It's There is no wrong way to get into gaming and to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
into the hobby. And so if you just like the minis and you want to paint them, buy them and paint them. Don't play the game. It's fine. If you just want to buy a mini and use it bare on the table, do that. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, but
I mean,
just
it
do it
matters
the
a
way
little
that you
bit.
want to
I mean,
do
a
it.
bare mini's not as it's not as good as a painted mini.
It's pretty
No.
cool. I mean, right now, I think one of the coolest things on a table is like an unpainted old Ralpartha mini from the 80s
Well, okay,
because they
that
look like
yeah.
they look like artifacts from a bygone
Yeah.
age.
Yeah, and the scale might not be right and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This
Yeah.
scale is
No,
definitely not right.
and it's totally like a my thing because I have a little bit of a pet peeve about not painted minis. Not pet peeve, that's a little strong, but like that's like the lowest on my. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to debate whether I'd rather use a counter, and I'm not a huge or token. I'm not a huge fan of tokens either because they're flat.
Mm-hmm.
and I like that third
Mm-hmm.
dimension, which is why
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some mini mine are still not punched, even though the art is beautiful, and I just have a hang up about that. And it's the same for me about the unpainted minis. Like out of respect for any player,
Okay.
I won't like complain if you show up and you want to use your unpainted mini. But I'll wait until I make a podcast and I'll talk shit about you. But I, but but for myself, I'm like I'd rather use something that's not quite the right fit from my little collection of plastic painted minis than a metal fancy perfect miniature that's not painted.
I gotcha.
But that's
I
just my
gotcha.
hang up. That's just me. I'm sure everyone's
And
got their hang
and
ups.
then when you get into the minis, painted minis on a tabletop, then you can also start getting into the idea of like 3D terrain, into Dwarven Forge and other like 3D terrain on your D&D tabletop,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah. Oh.
is a whole other realm of fantasy, mystery, and a ding to your pocketbook because the expense to get way into it is really high,
Yeah,
but it can really look cool.
yeah, yeah. That's a whole another thing that I. Yep.
Yeah. But it's just options, right? And you find the way that fits. Kayakone says no comment on the Dwarven Forge. Kayakone in our group is the one that has dipped his toes into those
Yeah,
waters.
he's just
But
so many cool
um,
like walls and dungeons.
but all of these different ways of doing it are, find out what works for you and for your gaming group, and what you can afford and what you like, and
Yeah,
there's options out there, and you can find something that'll work for you. I think that's it.
yeah,
There's
and I
there's
think
something there for you no matter where you come from, aesthetics wise or pricing wise.
I think you always know what sparks your fun, and I think that's what I look for a lot. Whether it's books or minis,
Yeah.
I know what my, like I was just saying, I'm like the tokens don't spark my fun. The paper might, but the painted mini really does spark my fun, so I lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big thing for people to do. Is, find what sparks your fun. Don't feel like it has to be any one thing and don't, I was being a little cheeky, a few minutes ago, but really, like, if it sparks someone else's fun or doesn't spark their fun, don't rain on their parade. Let them find their own
Yeah.
fun. Paint your own minivan.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Cool.
So I
Um,
think that does it for tonight. Yeah.
I think it does. I think that those were a series of topics and a show. So everybody listening to this on podcast, if you, it's really helpful for us if you liked what you heard. If you leave a review on iTunes, a 5-star review helps people find you. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button if you are so inclined, and consider subscribing to the channel. And Galen, what should they do if they're watching right now or the playback on Twitch?
Yeah. If you like what you see here, you can go ahead and hit the follow button up top. Go ahead and send me a message as well, and let me know that you liked the Gaming Adventure and Discovery Explorers. Because the more we hear back from you that you like it, the more get this thing rolling, and we'll make sure to talk about